Hello everyone and welcome to We Go Back. I'm your host Bryan Abou Chacra, and on this week's episode we will be reviewing The Greater Good and Born to Run, the 21st and 23rd episodes of the first season of Lost. Guys, the next episode of We Go Back podcast will be the final episodes of season 1, Exodus part 1 and part 2. I'm going to do all of them all together. This is, tied back to my old show, the Go Home Show, to the season finale, which is the one that we run straight into the end of the season in, which is going to be fun. I can't believe we're all the way through season 1 already, guys. So, starting off with The Greater Good. This episode follows the horrible events of the last one where Boone dies and is focused on the Sayid and Shannon aspect here on the island. Obviously, Shannon is distraught after the death of her brother, or she believes murder, just like Jack does. And we see Sayid watching her tend to her brothers in the case. She's very somber, very upset, and very sad. Sayid is trying to console Shannon in whatever way he can, but she is in shock. She can't even respond to him. And that's where we get our flashback for Sayid. We find out that the CIA needs his help to catch terrorists. And, forgive me on this episode and the next one. I feel like because they had so much stuff going on in the season finale of this show, that they kind of gave us a little bit of a lighter fare for these episodes and something a little bit different as well. This is sort of like a weird James Bondy spy undercover espionage episode, which was really cool. Again, the cool part about Lost is that they can have different shows or different styles of show in their entire series because each of these flashbacks can be so different. And in this one, it's really unique. We get to find out a lot about Sayid in this episode and what brought him to Sydney and got him on Flight 815. So really, really cool episode, guys. They are blackmailing him basically with the location of his loved lady Nadia, and he is supposed to go try to help find somebody in the CIA, find the terrorists. Apparently, they know that his roommate is now involved with these terrorists, so they're leveraging their information against Sayid. So really, really fun episode with all of these little flashbacks. So let's get back to on the island. We have Jack, who is absolutely incensed. He's out trying to find Locke in the forest, but as we know, and what's really cool, it's demonstrated to us up until this point, is that Jack absolutely cannot track. So even though he has this ambition to go out and try to find Locke, he has no direction. And because of that, Kate's able to catch up to him pretty quick and actually persuades him to come back for Boone's funeral, which I really appreciate the funerals in Lost. They make them very heartfelt and they do them very well. The music and the acting, everything about it is really somber and really sad. And I love the speech Sayid gives for Boone on the island when nobody really had anything to say, because he sort of felt like it was his obligation, or that something nice should be said about this guy who did so much for everybody, or tried to do and failed a lot, so much for everybody on this island since they crashed, and maybe was not appreciated for all of the stuff that he had been doing up until that point. So it's sort of a sad state of affairs. As Sayid is giving his speech, Locke returns and Jack absolutely loses it on him. I mean, he's got like half his blood in his body, he's not been sleeping, and he just loses his mind on Locke and tackles him and takes him down. That leads us into our flashback, and we see Sayid now being introduced to the other people in this terrorist cell, and in there we're also seeing his assertion as a communications officer. I really like what they do in this scene because one, they're playing Half-Life on the TV, which I thought was really funny. I think it was Half-Life 1. But what I enjoyed here was the tie-in to the last episode, where after Sayid finds the bug in the fire detector, his friend's colleague comes in and says, perhaps it's not happenstance that brought us together. And actually taking it as a bit of faith, or some sort of sign of fate for them, that Saeed was brought to them to help them achieve this mission. And I think that really tied in to what I was talking about in the last episode with Locke, and his ideal for wanting to have this great family, and that he saw this opportunity because he misread something that he believed to be, not just a crazy occurrence or just happenstance, but really it's destiny. And I think that this episode shows more of that theme, where these guys believe that Saeed is here to help them achieve their mission, but really he's here to help take them down and really betray them. So I wanted to bring that point up and move back to Jack and the island, where he is absolutely passing out. He can't stay up. He's delusional. You also have Claire, who's doing the exact same thing. She's just had a baby. She needs some rest. And I find it really interesting that these two people who really should be taking rest, and especially these two, for reasons that, give them more than enough opportunity to sleep. Like, you're the doctor, you just given half of your blood to somebody, and then you just gave birth to a child. You guys need to take some rest. What is wrong with you stubborn people? Like, what is it about these two that makes them so stubborn? And for Claire, she's afraid that somebody's going to take her baby, which everybody on the island, I feel like, and it gives you the impression that she might be a little bit paranoid about it. But if you consider what's happened to her so far with Ethan and everything else, I think that that's a fair assumption for her to have, and having, this predisposed feeling of the baby doesn't want her because she was going to give the baby away. I think it's absolutely reasonable that she would feel this anxiety that somebody's going to take her baby away. And one thing that I noticed while watching through it again is that, nobody listens to her when she tells people exactly how she feels. Nobody's listening to her. They all chalk it up to her pregnancy. And I think you can start to see the frustration in her build because of this. And it's a really interesting scene to see these people just not listening to her. I mean, yes, she needs to rest, but at the same time, she has some reason to be fearful. They should really kind of take it in stride. So that takes us to our next scene with Locke returning his Boone's belongings to Shannon on the beach, and he tells her that he hopes that she can forgive him, and that he should have gone up in the plane, but he couldn't, and that's why Boone went up there, and he was trying to help everybody and sort of give her peace for what happened to her brother. But Shannon doesn't really seem to go for it. She still believes that Locke killed her brother, and wants something done about it. So we'll see. She goes and finds Saeed, and she tells him, you said that you would do anything for me. What are you going to do about this? And we see the outcome of that a little bit later on in the episode. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. For now, we're going to talk a little about how Kate just knocks out Jack with sleeping pills. Because as we've seen now, with Jack not being able to stop giving blood to Boone, Jack sometimes needs to be forced to let go. Otherwise, he is going to run himself into ruin. He's really compulsive, is what I'm finding out as I'm watching through this time around on Lost, is that he's not as intelligent as I feel like I saw him when maybe I was younger. Maybe because I was younger, it seemed like he knew what he was doing. And as I've gotten older, I've had experiences and feel like he's very compulsive and doesn't take a moment to consider. So he's forced to be knocked out by Kate because he just needs to rest. And that kind of puts him out for a while in this episode and sets up a pretty interesting interaction later on. But Saeed now finds Locke in the caves and wants information on what happened to Boone. And I think what's the most surprising thing to Saeed in this entire encounter with Locke is his compliance to all of Saeed's demands. I think John is the most logical person on the show, interestingly enough. And again, he's based off of a philosopher, or his name is based off a philosopher. So it makes sense that he's kind of logic-based, but he also makes decisions on faith, and it feels like when his decisions are faith-based, they're very illogical. as we have been demonstrated in the last episode. So we see his compliance with Sayid, and he takes him out to find the plane. That's what Sayid wants to know, the final minutes of Boone's life, what happened. And I think what's great about this little exchange while they're walking through the jungle is that I believe 100% Locke knows what the line of questioning is for. Like I said, he's a very logical person. He's very reasonable. He knows that Shannon would be distraught, and being the type of person that she is, by the observations he's had and by the reactions that he's gotten from Boone and the information he's gotten that way, I think he knows that Sayid is not somebody who's going to be fooled easily and who gives up when he feels like he's, following a red herring or something. I think it really is a cool exchange, because you see these guys have more of a kind of upfront and logical discussion than we're used to having in Lost. Everything is so hidden behind, somebody's lies, that it's really cool to see Locke just, I think for him, it's like, if you ask, I'll give you the answer. Or at least that's what it felt like in this entire exchange between the two. And I find that that's really unique, because again, we hadn't seen that up until this point. So I think really John is the reason why. He knows he's a lot more logical, and I think that's what it comes down to. So in our flashback, we see that Sayid finds out his friend is going to be the martyr, and he is convinced by the CIA, because again, they're blackmailing him, to have his friend go through with it so that they could find out the location of the explosives and stop the attack. I love that it's the CIA and the Australian government blackmailing him, or conning him, if you want. In this case, everybody, like I said, ends up getting conned in this show, and it really continues as a theme, I think, as we watch along in this show. But I think it's pretty crazy that they're gonna go blow up this. I don't think that we're actually told what the target is. We're just told that there is a target and that they have a bomb. Actually, if you guys remember, I wasn't really paying attention to that. If you guys do remember what the target is, email me, wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. I want to remember what it was, but I feel like it was insignificant. Otherwise, I would have written it down. So let me take you back to Charlie on the beach. He's got the baby. Claire's actually set down for a little bit of rest, and he goes up to a lot of different people trying to find ways to soothe the baby. Hurley tries to sing I Feel Good. Absolutely worst rendition of it. But I love how we can have this sort of espionage side of the show, and then this sort of sitcom feel with these two guys trying to raise a baby on a deserted island. It's really cool. And it gives it sort of like a lightness to the show. It gives it a little bit more of a personality. It's not just this gloominess. And I think that's something that Lost always achieved really well and made it so accessible and had such a broad appeal, is that it wasn't just like, oh, this is all sci-fi, heavy sci-fi all the time. You can't relax from it. You got a little bit of funny, you got a little bit of humor, you got some, satire and I thought, and a lot of really cool action, especially as the show goes along. And I think that that's what really hooked people into watching Lost every week, is that you kind of went through this roller coaster ride. And it was really cool. So let's move along to Sayid finally being brought to the plane, and we see that it's that Beechcraft with the heroin. And did anybody else not think it was weird that Sayid just did some heroin? You probably guess in a baggie, you just took a hit. I'm just saying. But in this exchange, Sayid knows that Locke has had a gun this entire time on him that he found on the Nigerian priest, quote unquote, priest or drug smuggler. And Locke confesses to knocking out Sayid in this scene. I find this really, really interesting because, again, I said earlier that Locke is a very logical person. And he knows and explains in this scene that I'm telling you now because if I would have told you at the time, you wouldn't have been able to listen to reason, or you wouldn't have been able to have a conversation about it. You would have been too angry and in the situation to not even consider, hey, let's stop and think about this for a second. And he's trying to earn the trust of Sayid, which I think maybe he's telegraphing it too much by giving him a gun and then telling him something that would make him want to shoot him, make him angry. I think he's trying to show Sayid that I trust you to make logical decisions, please trust me to also be making those types of logical decisions. And I think this sort of mutual respect is starting to build here. You can see Saeed is looking at John in a different way as this episode goes along, and I think that's a really cool exchange that these two, I don't feel interacted a lot at all up until this point, and I'm trying to think about later on in the show. We'll have to pay attention as well if they continue to interact and what their interactions are like, because it's very different than most other people. They're both, Saeed, unless he gets very angry and and like really upset, tends to also be quite logical and very methodical. So I think it's cool to see these two almost tacticians. One because they played Risk, and one because they were in war, maybe, and a communications officer or a torturer. Sort of the meeting of minds here between the two, and I think that's a really fun. I think also it ties into the next scene in the flashback where Saeed is bringing up the greater good to his friend to try to convince him, because his friend's getting a little bit of cold feet, whatever it's called, about doing this bombing. He doesn't know if he should go through with it, and Saeed uses his relationship with Nadia. He said he loses her, lies to him for the greater good, and maybe this is the parallel here that Saeed is now seeing somebody else lie for the greater good. And this theme is also brought up in the next episode when we get to Born to Run. I'll talk more about lying and discretion, as these are, I think, big themes. Again, Lost is such a great show for having these themes not just be something only for this episode, but they tie in week to week, and it's really, really cool. So I think this episode, like I said, might be a little bit light in terms of a lot of in-depth analysis, but you get to see the continuation of themes and some exposition for certain characters. And again, when you see where they come from, you see where their decision making is brought up from, and I think that's cool that you get to see that with Saeed here. I want to bring up a funny question that Walt asks his dad when he's talking to him about the boats and everything like that. He says, "What if a shark attacks?" I mean, I don't know anything about the South Pacific or any regions like that, but I wanted to point that out because I always thought that was interesting that Walt talks about what if sharks attack. Just wanted to point that out. You guys can remember it or not. Might come back, might not. I don't know. Why would I mention it? Anyhow, let's move along. Charlie finds the most soothing voice on the island, which apparently ends up being Sawyer. It's the only thing that makes that baby quiet. Again, a little bit of comedy from the show, a little bit of humor that you can have this guy who's sort of this outlaw renegade loner, and he has the most soothing voice that ends up putting this crying baby to sleep after Charlie's tried everything, walking around, everything. And it's Sawyer's voice that soothes the baby. This end of the episode kind of moves in rapid fire because things pick up really quick. We have Jack waking up to the key being gone to the gun case. We find out, we think it's Sawyer or somebody else, but Saeed knows it's Shannon. He finds Shannon in the jungle with Locke, and Shannon's a little fucker again. Oh, she's a little fucker. She had come back. We actually liked her for a little bit. Now she's a little fucker again. Fucking up shit, pointing guns at people, not knowing what she's doing. She's never fired a gun before. She shows that she does. What a petulant child. She's just a little fucker again. I really hate this part. I think this episode is really cool because you see this sort of like rebound from the death of this character who we all really loved, and we also see this character who we're starting to like more in Saeed try to convince somebody to create mass murder and blow up a bunch of people. And we also get that mix and see more of the faith. I mean, obviously this is tied to a theme that was really big at the time, which is terrorists and bombings. I mean, it still is now. And in the Middle East and everything in that time period, it was a hot topic. Lost did a lot of really hot topic stuff, not from the store, but hot topic items in the news with stories like this. You know, the idea of being in a terrorist cell and being on the other side rather than trying to bring it down, but trying to make it happen. We see that happen in this episode. It's really cool because this was 2005. So it wasn't too far removed from Operation Iraqi Freedom or whatever it ended up being called later. Either way, really, really cool that they have a little bit more of an explanation. They show the good in the religion here when you see the two find each other in the mosque and have that relationship and that camaraderie of brotherhood and friendship and the ideas behind it. And they talk about the good parts in the scriptures and in the readings, not just the negative parts. You hear, the things that make Hassan very very weary about doing it are saying about innocent people, and he's quoting the text from their scripture. And I think that that's cool that Lost took the time to paint Muslim culture in a more positive light and not just as radical extremists. And that's something that I wanted to bring up in this episode, especially because I think that they could have definitely done more of a stereotypical Iraqi character or terrorist idea. But they went with one that was a little bit more of, hey, in the scripture, it does say that this stuff isn't good. And we see Hassan he gets into the truck that they're going to, use in this attack, and he starts to pray. And for him, it's supposed to be about redemption and supposed to be about, not necessarily revenge, but showing people that they can't just take away from others. And it's not painted as just this violence and this villainy and this hate. It's painted as this man who's broken has been pushed to find these people because he feels like he wants some sort of restitution or some sort of happiness for having lost the woman that he loves. And I think that that's cool that he gets in the car and they show him praying as something that's supposed to be holy to him, not just hateful. And we don't see him as a hateful person. We see him as a scared individual, absolutely terrified. And we find out that Saeed in this entire episode has conned his friend into doing all of this stuff. And Saeed is also a con artist. So here we go, adding on top of all of the other characters. So is Saeed. This causes his friend to put the gun in his head and pull the trigger. That leads Saeed to want to know where his remains will be, which forces Saeed to actually end up staying. And that is exactly why Saeed is on flight 815. He was booked for a different flight. If he would have taken that flight and not put his friend to rest. So you got to also think, Saeed has come to the island and just put his friend to rest. Maybe, I think at this point they're on the island for like 30, 40 days. I forget. But, now he's also putting Boone to rest and having to deal with this with Shannon as well. And man, it's a hard time for Saeed. Talk about bad luck if we want to talk about Hurley. Look at Saeed. He's been going through some crap too. So it's a very tough time for Saeed, and we see him continue to have these troubles when he has to tackle Shannon and stop her from shooting Locke, not because he wanted to save his life, but because it was for the greater good. I think saving one man's life, even though she would have felt better about doing it, he convinces her. Tries to convince her not to, but ends up having to tackle her, and she's not too happy about that. But that's kind of the situation Saeed has to deal with now. He's made his decision to help save Locke even though it's going to end up hurting him. And a couple of things I want to mention before we get out of this episode. We have a little bit more of the dynamism of Lost with Sawyer reading to the baby, the tenderness of the character, how even though he seems like a renegade and this maverick asshole that people kind of don't like. And, last week I was asked, why do I like or identify with Sawyer? I think it's moments like these where he truly isn't an awful person. He just struggles with a lot of his personal issues, and he wants to be helpful and he wants to see the baby be more comfortable, but maybe he has a hard time being genuine. And I think it's cool to see his tenderness and see a little bit of his character there as he's reading to the baby from, I think, an auto magazine. And I find that's a really nice touch and gives you a good example of what kind of character we have in Sawyer. And one of the reasons I always enjoyed his character, because again, there's so much more to his character than just what we're seeing, and I love the more the show goes on, the more we get to see about him. So to close up this episode, we have Saeed approach Locke and say, "No more games, John. I know you're lying. Take me to the hatch." We're on to Born to Run. Born to Run is a Kate episode. This episode is named, I believe, after the Bruce Springsteen song, which I had never heard and still haven't heard. Didn't know it was a Bruce Springsteen song until 2012, and I looked up the lyrics before this episode started, and I tried to read them to see if there was anything interesting for this episode, and there really isn't. I think it's just a Bruce Springsteen song, and pretty interesting title for this episode. I think that's all. I mean, you just see a woman who does exactly that, and we find out a lot about her history in this episode. I think we have a lot of explanation on what brought Kate to the mindset that she's in, and we also see that Kate, much like Sawyer, has a letter that makes her cry. We don't know what the letter says or what's going on in it, but she has a letter that makes her past very dark. And then we also see that she moves from place to place and changes her appearance and her name as she goes along. I think that's really interesting, tying back to the first few episodes of the season where Sawyer says, I know girls like you, and she goes, not exactly like you, and he really does. He really understands where she's coming from, and we see how much he knows that in this episode. We find out on the beach that if they don't set sail with the raft soon, that the trade winds will be blowing the opposite direction that they need to go and send them to Antarctica. This is all told to us by our wonderful new character, Dr. Arts. And we love this character. It's the first time we see him, and he's a great guy. We love to see this guy in this show. What a wonderful, wonderful character that we're going to have moving forward. But one thing I do have to comment with his analysis here is if a compass and Saeed aren't right, how does he know what north and south is? How does he know what's going on if the compass is completely off from where north is expected? Why would he be an authority? Because he's a doctor or a high school science teacher? I don't know why they're using his advice as gospel, but I find it really interesting. Compass didn't even work, but they're going with him. Nobody wanted to bring up the compass, but he basically says that they should have set sail yesterday. And Kate comes up to Michael and basically just invites herself onto the boat. She doesn't even say, is there room for me or anything? She's just saying, because I'm going on that boat. That's it. She's definitely on the boat. This episode is going to show you a lot of missteps by Kate. I really find this episode to be a testament to part of her character that I'm recognizing in this watch through as very, very funny. We'll come back to that in a minute. I don't want to get too derailed from it right now. But yeah, she basically forces herself onto this raft, or tries to. And Kate is in her flashback now. Kate is trying to deliver some flowers to somebody, goes into the area where her room is and sees a state marshal, covers up her face, and keeps walking. So we don't know who she's trying to visit, but for some reason, there's a state marshal set up there and she can't risk being caught. So she decides to enlist the help of her friend, who apparently also works at this hospital. So maybe the illusion here is that this is her hometown and she's come back there for some reason. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out more. Because next up, we have Sun and Jin and their interaction on the beach. We find out that Jin is going on this raft. So we know who the 4 people are that Michael had referenced had a spot on the raft at the beginning of the episode. He says that that there are no more people going on. The 4 people are Michael, Walt, Sawyer, and Jin. And we now know that Jin is just leaving Sun behind on the island, and we don't know what he's going to do or what she's going to do. So we cut now to Saeed, who is walking Jack through the jungle, and Jack in this part is being so annoying. He can't just follow Saeed. Saeed hasn't led him astray at all in this entire series. He's done everything he can to be helpful, and Jack is being like, if you don't tell me what you came me to do, then I'm gonna turn around. I'll just do it. I swear I'll do it. If you don't tell me, I'll do it. Shut up and follow this guy. He maybe has a reason for showing you something instead of telling you. Hey, we found a hatch in the ground. If somebody told you that, you'd be like, what the fuck does that mean, man? You wouldn't be down for it, and you would not be open to it, because what we find out is that Locke has asked for Sayid to come with Jack so that he can have an open mind. He asked him not to tell Jack what was in the ground. I think that's a pretty fair way to deal with the situation, especially given the subject matter. So we have them being brought over to the hatch. Meanwhile, on the beach, we have Michael getting upset with Sawyer after his conversation with Kate about trying to get on the raft. We find out Kate has sailing experience and all of this great stuff, and sort of shakes the foundation that Michael has with the trust for Sayid, or I'm sorry, for Sawyer on the raft. And Sawyer knows that Kate is only doing this for one reason, because she wants to run. And he confronts her and tells her about it. She tells him, "I want your spot. I'll take it." And he isn't too happy with that. She walks away, and we get back to that a little bit later. Because now I want to get back to the debate between Jack and John over discretion, which is the theme that I wanted to talk about for these two episodes. Being secretive and using discretion to choose which people should know what. And in this case, Jack is upset that John didn't tell him about about this hatch and the plane and everything else. And John is saying, "Well, how long did you have those guns, the Halliburton case full of guns, before you found it necessary to tell us? Why did you think it was okay? I don't have to report to you. You don't have to report to me. But why did you think it was okay?" Well, because you use discretion, and I'm trusting your discretion. I think that's the other thing about this interesting relationship between Jack and John, is that it shows the sort of backgrounds and their tendencies. Jack is not willing to. He's too skeptical. He's not willing to just have faith in John. And John, almost in a way, has too much faith in Jack. He's okay with the fact that Jack held on to the guns without telling anybody about it for too long. And all of these different discretionary questions that they have in this episode really starts to pile up in this specific episode in Born to Run. We start to see a lot of it really pile up, and they start to fight also on whether or not to open the hatch. Saeed's making some great points about what could be in there. Why would a hatch not have a handle on the outside if you weren't meant to open it from the outside? So that might be something to consider. Again, Sayid is being more logical, thinking about worst case scenarios, and there maybe the hatch is there because it's containing something. Who knows? I mean, there is no handle to it. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason that there isn't even a hole for a handle. It's not like it broke off. There just isn't a handle on it. And on top of all of that, you got those numbers stamped on the side, which we still are trying to figure out what those have to do. It gets pretty heavy, you guys. It's gonna continue to get heavy. But what I find really funny about this entire interaction between Jack and John is that they immediately come back to the beach and almost seem to be on good terms again, like they kissed and made up. And I find that is actually addressed later by Michael as like, "Oh, you guys all good again?" It's like, "Nah, I haven't forgiven him." But it was a really funny thing to just see them kind of like good cop, bad cop, going around questioning everybody about what's going on with Michael, because he's been poisoned up until this point. We were trying to figure out who had done it, but it's really funny to see these two sort of like put their past behind them, even though like just I think even earlier that day Jack had attacked Locke, or I guess it was the day before, but either way he was that angry. Maybe it was because he was delirious, but find it really funny to have them sort of like kiss and make up and get to like working to try to figure out who did the poisoning, or what happened to Michael. And they think Sawyer did it because he was told that he couldn't be on the raft, and all of this, hoopla and everything goes around. And then Hurley actually brings up something which talks about discretion here. I think this is great, about Kate being the fugitive, and then Jack having a negative reaction to that, and John going, "Why didn't you feel this necessary to tell the the rest of us. And, Jack being, I feel like the way he said it was so bitchy and so like catty. And he's just like, discretion, John. It's like, okay, we get it. You're gonna fucking shove this down my throat every time, aren't you? I just, really find that that's really annoying. Jack kind of is annoying when he's so driven. He can't lose focus of his results. He loses his like ability to think straight and just gets focused on achieving his goal. And it makes me absolutely crazy when he acts like this. Like I said earlier in the episode, the way he was talking to Saeed, and now how he's talking to John. Anyhow, Hurley in this scene is just confused and gets frustrated and describes exactly how I feel in this entire part of the show. He's just like, I can't keep it straight with all the lies and who knows what and what is this and who's in the know about anything. I think it's perfect. Hurley is very much like the voice of what we were all thinking in that moment, and I love that. It made me laugh so hard. But we have a scene later in the evening where Jack talks to Kate about who poisoned Michael. He wants to know if she did it. He just flat out asks her. He doesn't even bother beating around the bush. And she seems so offended by the fact that he would ask that. And it's absolutely within the realm of reasonability that he would ask that question, considering she literally just drugged him. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense that he would go and ask her just up front, did you do it, Kate? Absolutely makes sense to me. So in our flashback, we find out that Kate and her friend Tom have been digging up this time capsule. Inside, we find the plane that Kate has been carrying around with her for several years and stole out of a safety deposit box. And we now know the owner of the plane is this man, Tom, who apparently is the man she loved and the man she killed. Could this be the reason that she's on the run? Well, we're going to find out. But what I want to point out is that on this tape, they are recording, the date of recording, I should say, is August 15th, which would be the eighth month of the year, the 15th day. That's one of those numbers, guys. 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42. They're going to be everywhere. Keep looking around. We even have a really special one I got an email about that I had never seen, that I was surprised I hadn't caught up until that point. So there are those numbers again. And that's the number on the deposit box for the plane as well. It was 815 and the flight number 815. So very, very cool tie in there with these numbers. So moving on from there, in the tape, we hear that Kate has wanted to run since she was a child, and she has a dark past as to why. She says, and you know why, but we still don't know. So maybe that might be the reason why she's on the run. We have no idea yet. But I want to cut to John in the caves. We have Walt walking up to him, and we see that John is tending to the wound on his knee that he sustained with Boone. Walt asks him, does it hurt? And I thought it was really funny that John was smiling and laughing that it did hurt, because he responds that it does, until I realized that he's happy to have feeling in his leg again. That before in the other episode, he had established that he couldn't feel and he couldn't walk, and now he has feeling in his leg again. So it's good that it hurts. That's why he's laughing there. But the situation quickly turns sour when Walt somehow seems to know about the hatch and tells Locke not to open it. So now we're starting to see even more about the fact that Walt kind of is special. It's not just John saying that he has a gift and that you should let him explore it. He now knows about something that he hasn't even been told about, and he's able to recite it to John. Really, really eerie scene. He says, "Don't open it, Mr. Locke," and then runs away from him, which is really creepy, really eerie. But we are starting to find out that Walt has something exceptional about him. Not just slight difference, but something exceptional. Throughout all of this episode, with the poisoning and everything, there's a lot of mudslinging and people being blamed for this poisoning. Sawyer gets blamed for it, and because of that is pushed to expose Kate as the fugitive, tells everybody about what she did, and Kate is forced to confess to everybody that she was the one the marshal was carrying. And we find out that this goes as deep as to her mother, because when her mother sees her in the hospital, Kate finally is actually there to see somebody. Diane is her mother. That's who Diane is the whole episode, but we find out her mother is not happy to see her. After a couple minutes or a couple seconds of them locking eyes, her mother starts to cry and just starts to yell for help. So Kate, born to run, starts running, tries to book it out of there. Her friend Tom comes with her and she wants his keys. She wants to get out of there. She doesn't give a shit about anybody else. She's got to run. So she takes his keys and him, and they go to the car. They try to escape. And things don't work out the way that she wants him to. She ends up getting her friend killed because she drives at a police officer in a car, which is reason to shoot at a car. So she does cause her friend Tom, so the man that she loved, because they did exchange a nice passionate kiss earlier and talk about being married when they were younger, and it was the man that she killed because she caused his death. So we see the origin of this plane, and we now know that Kate actually did not lie to Jack in this scene, that she told him that it was the man that she loved and the man that she killed. But either way, we see Kate as a criminal has got to be one of the worst. She, when in Australia, couldn't get away from Sam Toomey or whatever. Wait, was that Sam Toomey? No, it wasn't. I forget the guy's name. But we find out that she's out there and ends up getting caught because she's careless and didn't run because of the car crash that she got with the farmer. I can't remember his name right now. And we see her get her friend killed. In this case, she actually, this is an instance where she got him killed, whereas in the other one, she saved him. But either way, she's almost caught in both scenarios. But we do actually see a difference in the newer version where she pulls the guy out. That's what causes her to get captured. Whereas in the other one, she causes her friend to die and got away. So yes, she does get away, but she does get into a lot of shit along the way that definitely could have been avoided if she wasn't so... I think she thinks she's smarter than she is. Oh, I'm going to go try to see my mom and try to get into this hospital, and this place is, under tight security. Why would you think it'd be easy to go break in and do all this stuff? And man, I wonder what she did that made her mom not happy to see her. But we do know that she's already on the run here. So it wasn't the death of the man that she loved or killed. It's something else that caused her to be a fugitive. And that's something we have yet to find out. So continuing on this theme of people confessing, this whole episode has a lot of confessions. We see Sun watching Jin build the raft and get ready to set sail the next day, confesses or is kind of told by Jack that he knows she was the one who poisoned Jin, is what she was trying to do to keep him off the boat, but Michael ends up drinking the water instead, and he's the one who ends up getting poisoned. But again, Jack, using his discretion, decides not to tell the others about it because he believes it's unnecessary for them to know. But before Jack leaves, he gives Sun a little piece of advice, which is to go say goodbye. And I think it's from a personal place, that if he had the chance to tell his father goodbye, even though they weren't on good terms, he would have still told him goodbye because he may never see him again, and he did love him. And that's something that he should do, that she should do for him, which I thought was really nice, that we can see again when Jack isn't so wrapped up in his craziness. He's actually a very logical and thoughtful person and caring and considerate. I thought that was a really cool addition to the episode, and not just for the reveal, but one of my favorite scenes in this episode comes here at the fire, where Sawyer and Kate sort of talk about the game of grifting, of trying to get their way without people knowing that they're being manipulated. And Sawyer confesses that he wouldn't have done that, but he thought she was trying to take his place on the raft, and he took her up on her offer. He believed that she could be capable of anything because he knows what kind of person she is. Again, they share something there, and he shares even more. He confesses to her that the reason why he wants to leave this island is because he believes that she's all for Jack. She doesn't want anything to do with him, and there's nothing left on the island for him if she's not there. So we now find out for sure, and in 3 episodes, find out both of these guys definitely have something for Kate in this show, and I think it's cool that they have solidified the intentions here of both of those characters. But
While we're on the theme of confessions, Walt confesses to burning the first raft and telling his father that it was because he didn't want to leave the island. And Michael, surprisingly, switches his tune and decides to stay on the island. But Walt, at this point, after the conversation with John, says, "No, Dad, we need to go." Well, he doesn't say, "No, Dad." He says, "Yes, we do need to go," in response to his father. And we find out at the very end, the last bit of the discretion theme is son's discretion on not telling Jack about Kate poisoning or coming up with the idea to poison her husband to keep him on the island. And we continue the web of lies that is lost, taking us into our next episode of We Go Back, which is going to be a really hefty, long episode, since we'll be basically covering 3 episodes in one instead of the normal 2. But before we get into that, I want to get to my emails. I have one from Omar who asks, "Are Walt's supernatural tendencies one of Lost's unanswerable questions, or does Walt have a legitimate reason to be afraid of what's inside the hatch?" I think that in this episode, we are shown Walt has a bit of a clairvoyance or more of a special ability than we had realized before. They'd been teasing at it throughout the show, but here we see him have an interaction with John that is completely supernatural. And we will go, as we go on, I should say, we will discover a little bit more about Walt's powers and what he can do, and we'll get to those as we get along. I don't want to spoil too much, but thank you for your email, Omar. It's always nice to hear from you. The second email is from Ryan. Good to hear from you again. First, he says, "Before the episodes, I recently bought the Blu-rays, and I don't believe it is a coincidence. I noticed something when I started them up that I don't think a lot of people have talked about. The ABC Studios logo screen seems to have a familiar set of numbers on the sound take clapper. He sends me a photo, and it is so cool. I actually had never noticed this before. The clapper on the ABC Studios has 4, 8, 23, and 42. This is the timekeeper thing that they use when they are making marks. So when they know how to sync up the audio and the video, if they ever have an issue with that. And it does feature those numbers on it. I don't have another set of ABC Studios Blu-rays or anything else. So if you guys do, let me know if you see those numbers on the clapper. It's pretty cool that they're there on the slate. So thanks for that, for noticing that, Ryan. That's really cool. I would have never picked up on that before. So let's go into the first episode, For the Greater Good. He says, "I think it's a very classy move by Sayid to step up and say some kind words on Boone's courage for Shannon. Jack certainly looks exhausted in this scene on the beach. Just his face and eyes, the pale, sickly look. Doom, a classic game, maybe foreshadowing the future of these men and their fates." I think it was Half-Life, so I don't mean to call you out there, but I'm pretty sure that was Half-Life. If you guys know for sure, email me, wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. Tell me Half-Life or no. If it's not, I'm sorry, Ryan, but I'm pretty sure they were playing Half-Life, which I think might have some loose tie-in maybe later on. We'll get to that. I was really impressed with Shannon's acting with Locke on the beach. She's really devastated, and I know a lot of people don't like her, but I think she's great. Wow, Kate certainly seems like you've done this before. How can you be so sure you did the right dosage? Aren't you concerned you could be hurting the doctor on the island by drugging him or overdosing? He's referencing her knocking out Jack on the beach. Next, I love the interaction between Sayid and Locke on the walk to the plane. 2 absolute badasses. Only thing I noticed was if Locke had a cold at the time of filming this, his voice sounded different to me in the scene as a whole. I think it was just a perfect take, but loved how when Hurley was singing to the baby right at the crescendo of his big song, the massive wave explodes behind him for a big finish. I think that's pretty cool too, but definitely was not on purpose. I could be crazy, but when watching this episode, I noticed while Sayid was working with the government and trying to protect and save Nadia, all the cutbacks to the island were to Claire's baby. The innocence and protecting those that we love, even sometimes unbeknownst to them. After he fully commits to this evil deed of forcing his friend, who doesn't even seem sure he wants to do this horrendous act, the next cutback isn't to Claire's baby anymore, but to Shannon and her asking Sayid to commit a potential evil deed on the island, hurting going after John Locke.
Very good observation. I think that is the parallel they're absolutely trying to draw here, and that's really good that you picked up on that. Great analysis for that. He goes on to say in Born to Run, love the callback to Joanna in the Saeed episode. Before this and this episode with Kate trying to steal her ID. Even if you aren't a main player, you still feel like bigger than just the core. And I think that that's really cool that they actually have a callback to a character who we didn't even see other than out in the ocean drowning. And Lost always has this little bit of detail. They make everybody on the show a character that we all know at least. And we have a little bit of a callback to him. We have the whole Scott and Steve thing. I think these kinds of things are what give Lost the depth that makes it so much fun. He goes on to say, my big question for you is when Locke grabs Walt's arm, that's when Walt seems to go weird, and it seems that there's a special connection between these two. Locke being the first on the flight to see the monster, and Walt, since his episode special, we've known is quite different. What do you think triggered this moment to happen with Walt? I don't think Walt even knows what triggered this moment for him. He just knows that something is wrong and is able to have a clarity that nobody else on the island does. I think John recognizes that Walt has this ability, and so because of that, they always have this connection, but I don't know that there's anything outside of it that's really explained. But thank you so much for your email. Ryan, Omar, and all of the great people who email me every week, and those who are thinking about emailing me but haven't yet, please keep on sending your emails to wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. However, guys, for the next episode, I will not be taking any emails because I have a special treat for you guys in this next episode because it's so big and there's so much to cover on this episode. I went out and got a little bit of help on next week's episode of We Go Back to close out season 1. I'm going to have Rocco Bodie of Mega 64 on the show with me for the entirety of Exodus part 1, 2, and 3. So I apologize that we won't be able to take any email questions that week because it's just going to be so jam-packed. It's going to be an extra long episode. I already know it. We won't be able to take any emails then, but guys, every single week, I do appreciate your emails. I love reading your theories and the stuff that you have to say. Please continue to email me even for those episodes so that we can talk and discuss what you guys thought about it, but we won't have any time for it next week. It's going to be a little bit of a special episode, so really excited for that. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. So looking forward to seeing you guys back here next week. Thank you for sticking through me through this episode. We will be back next Thursday with a new episode of We Go Back. Look forward to talking to you guys then. Thank you for tuning in.